Okay, so the very first thing we're going to get into with installing your Simple Profits operating system and ultimately building wedge equity in your business is to get organized, right? Everything starts somewhere. We just happen to be starting here because organization realistically is key. Many businesses oftentimes are not organized for a very specific why. There's usually a why behind everything. As you continue to work through the boot camp, you'll definitely see that from us, that we believe there's a why behind everything. Usually we try to get to the why. If you listen to our content elsewhere, you kind of already know that. In terms of organization, the why behind it, or realistically disorganization, life cycle of a lot of companies is typically they're not built to suit in the form of let's set up a system, or let's set up a business system, or let's create an asset that we're going to sell, right? Most organizations exist because there is a problem and a path and a pursuit to profitability or to revenue. And founders typically chase that, right? They typically follow that path. And one thing typically leads to the next. And as things grow, more things happen. And typically what happens is things don't stay either together, they don't stay specific, they don't stay to a plan, they don't keep it simple. And sometimes that feels like a lot of chaos, right? Organized chaos is pretty common, especially in, solopreneur businesses, let alone, startups, growth startups. But it's natural and it's the case and it's perfectly okay, right? It's absolutely okay. The reason why we start with organization first is because it allows us to kind of put all of that stuff to the side and then keep it simple and then only focus on what's necessary. So realistically, the why behind getting organized is to focus on simplicity and keep it simple with what we actually need to move the meter forward. And the other aspect of organize, and why we like to start with organize, is pull back curtain. This is also a great way to kind of diligence an organization quickly, especially from a high level. So when you're working through this organized section, which we will work through each of the modules together in a workshop fashion, right? So we're going to work through this entire organized section. One of the things at the end here is the diligence checklist, right? So that's just to kind of fast forward videotape for you a little bit. But net, a big part of completing this organized portion over here is really a high level diligence of a business. If a company can work through the organized section pretty efficiently and effectively in a timely manner, then there's a really good sense from a confidence ratio that that organization is potentially deal ready, an organization that actually can move forward and potentially go a little bit deeper into a deal structure to actually get to an acquisition. So there is like a high level litmus test. And we'll typically use this organized section and how much time it takes for folks to kind of rally behind and actually complete the organized section to use as a pulse check of where the business is actually at, right? For example, the first handful of sections here is really all about kind of the leadership of the organization, the vision of the organization, more of the founder-centric or leadership-centric stuff, right? So we're talking about things like the simplicity of the business model, like how complicated is the business? Can it be captured on a lean canvas quickly, right? The forecast, where are we at in terms of forecasting and modeling, setting goals and objectives, and then cascading those through objectives and key results, OKRs. If typically an organization can make it through these fast, then that means that all of this work, pre-work, is typically done, or there's a healthy level of cadence of conversation around these things where it can get articulated and captured pretty quickly. If not, which is also okay, it's perfectly okay, that's why we're doing this. If that's not the case, then we'll find that this typically will take a little bit longer to work through because there's some thought that has to go into it, right? This is very intentional, everything we're doing here. So that's just a high level kind of litmus test to tell us like where we're at as an organization, right? Or where this business is at. And then that's very much so going to be the thing that allows us to cascade forward in the right direction, at the right pace, at the right cadence, to the right conversation, right? So there's a method to the madness across the board. And as we do continue to work through this operating system, there is really a method to the madness behind all of it, right? Once we work through this, what we'll end up with is a pretty good picture in this organized section, a pretty good picture of what your business is. Realistically, the culmination of this should be enough that you could hand to anybody, realistically, or any qualified individual. And they should get a pretty good, keen understanding of what your company is pretty fast. That's going to be really successful and healthy for, current team members, future team members, potentially future partners, definitely investors, definitely acquirers, right? Anybody on a strategic level, and specifically and most importantly, yourselves, right? So for a lot of reasons, and definitely more, very good, healthy place to start. And the next thing we're going to jump into is actually the business model. We'll work through a lean canvas together, and then we'll continue it forward. Definitely budget probably at least several hours, for this organized section. The reality is I think the organize ultimately takes the most time for some reason, because a lot of it is like decluttering, what's already there, or going and creating what's not. And again, both are perfectly okay. Both are super healthy. And it's just something that needs to take place, which again is perfectly understandable. And it is what it is. Everything starts here. We're starting here now. I would just say, like, for expectation management's sake, typically the organize takes the most time. And then once we get through organize, obviously we're going to move to strategize, standardize, and optimize. And it actually takes cascadingly, less time. So on that being said, let's jump into the business model.